On Wednesday, Michael Harriot of TheRoot.com ran a shocking piece titled "Everything You Think You Know About the Death of Mike Brown is Wrong, and the Man Who Killed Him Admits It." Provocative! Sally Cohn of CNN, she of Hands Up, Don't Shoot fame, tweeted out the article with this caption: "We all need to read and reckon with how our media, courts, everything believed white cops' lies over black kids' truth." All of which means that you'd think the article would actually substantiate the headline. After all, most people think Michael Brown attacked a police officer, Darren Wilson, inside his vehicle after being pulled over, then tried to grab the officer's gun, then ran when a shot was fired in the car before turning around, charging the cop and being shot. That's what all the witness testimony said, repeatedly, from black witnesses. So what did Officer Wilson say that changed everything? According to TheRoot.com, reporting on a court document originally obtained by Wesley Lowery of The Washington Post, a guy who, by the way, reported in laudatory terms about the unrest in Ferguson at the time, Wilson stated that he reached through the window of his car and grabbed for Brown's body during the encounter. Of course, Wilson never said anything different. He always maintained Brown punched him in the face, at which point he grabbed at Brown as Brown leaned into the car. He pulled his gun. Brown attempted to grab his gun. He fired his gun, and the rest of the events ensued. But here's how The Root describes the events. Two men are walking down the street. A cop pulls in front of them, blocking their path. Instead of calling for backup or radioing in a traffic stop, he opens his car door and either Brown closes it or it ricochets off of Brown's body. The officer then chooses to reach through his window and grab the suspect by his arm and body. Wilson had a gun and Brown is hanging inside the car. Brown does not reach for the officer's gun, and the cop admits that Brown's only weapon was his big, scary black self. The next part of the testimony will confound the conservatives who stated that Wilson did not shoot Brown in the back. Wilson admits that after the first shot, Brown started running away from him, and he fired another shot, which missed Brown. Wilson basically admits that he fired at Brown and the bullet hit a building close by. Then, The Root alleges that Wilson admits to having used the N-word. Other headlines have repeated this. They neglect to mention that Wilson explicitly says he only used the N-word in order to repeat a, quote, racist remark made by someone else, but I have not made a racist remark against another individual while on duty as a police officer, unquote. Oops. But what about the rest of this narrative? It's just not true. Wilson doesn't admit any of the things The Root says he admits, as Wesley Lowery himself tweeted. Here's what Lowery tweeted. "There are unanswered Ferguson questions, but a lot of assertions in this piece going viral today based on the doc I reported yesterday are wrong. The court documents reveal none of these things. Wilson is asked specific questions. He's not asked others. Can't infer entire narrative by filling in the blanks based on things he's not asked. Wilson admits that Brown did not try to remove your gun from your holster. This is not the same as admitting Brown never reached for the gun. Nowhere in this document does Wilson address who initiated contact. Admits at some point he reached through the window. Doesn't address the timeline. There is nothing I've seen in December 28th admissions from Darren Wilson that materially alters and contradicts his previous version of the story. Lowery is honest and reports this correctly. I've read the entire document. It is clear that The Root, and by proxy Sally Cohn, are confabulating Wilson's testimony into a story of their own making, a narrative repeatedly debunked by third-party witnesses and the Department of Justice itself, which found no wrongdoing by Wilson. This is how leftist narratives spread. And there will be violence spurred on by such narratives because the hard left likes its riots just so long as the riots are aimed at the establishment, meaning in this case, the cops. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Oh, well, today is mailbag day, and so that's very exciting. We're going to be doing that a little bit later, which is why you need to become a subscriber over at dailywire.com. We're also going to be talking, I'm going to break down this awful, awful court decision from a judge in a federal district judge in Hawaii, striking down or at least putting a temporary hold on President Trump's executive order on immigration and refugees. I will break that down for you. Awful, awful decision. I read the decision twice because it's so bad that it took twice just to comprehend all the stupidity inherent in it. But first, we have to say thank you to our friends and sponsors over at Lyft. So, if you need to go somewhere and you're looking for the best ride-sharing app there is, Lyft is it. And if you've tried Lyft, you know what I mean. It's high-quality drivers. All the cars are new. They show up in 3.5 minutes on average. Every Lyft driver is fully vetted through a 10-point safety standard, including criminal and DMV background checks. You know you're going to get around quickly and safely. We use Lyft all the time in my family. I use it. My wife uses it. More important to me that my wife uses it because sometimes she's coming home late from the hospital. She's really tired. And as a young and beautiful woman, it is important to me that my wife is picked up by people who I know that I can trust with safety, and same thing for her. And that's why she uses Lyft. You can also tip in the app, which means that the drivers are happier. 9 out of 10 Lyft rides get a perfect 5-star rating from the passenger. It's a better all-around experience. The quality is really, really high. And right now, if you download the Lyft app and you use promo code Shapiro, you get up to 3 free rides. You get 3 free rides up to $10 each, a $30 value when you enter promo code Shapiro. So go download the app right now, the Lyft app, Lyft. promo code Shapiro. And again, you get a $30 value, 3 free rides up to $10 each. Promo code Shapiro. And it is the best ride-sharing app there is, Lyft, and we thank them for being our sponsors. Obviously, use that promo code Shapiro in order to get the discount and also to let them know that we're the ones who sent you. Okay, so one of the worst judicial decisions in recent memory came out yesterday from a district court judge in Hawaii, and he struck down Donald Trump's revised executive order. Now, we didn't really talk too much about Donald Trump's revised executive order because basically what the revised executive order on immigration and refugees did is it got rid of a lot of the things that the Ninth Circuit objected to and the federal district court in Washington objected to originally in the first executive order. So, first things first. The first executive order was fully constitutional and it was fully legal. But the court struck it down anyway. They said that it affected green card holders, which was a problem. They said that it was religiously discriminatory, which really shouldn't have been a problem, but they said it was. So the new version got rid of all language with regard to Islam and Christianity. The new version got rid of its application to green card holders. The new version broadened the ability for the Secretary of State to grant admission to people on the basis of exceptions to the rules set up. It's a facially neutral statute, meaning it has no differentiation between Muslims and anybody else. That didn't stop the court. So this federal district judge basically decides, and this is basically what the decision comes down to. It's an amazing thing. The decision comes down to, I don't like Donald Trump, therefore the executive order is bad. And that is not much of a simplification. The entire decision rests on the idea that he's not actually going to read the verbiage and not going to read the actual wording of the executive order. Instead, they're just going to look at stuff that Donald Trump has said over the past 2 years and say, look, it looks like Donald Trump doesn't like Muslims. Therefore, even though this particular executive order doesn't discriminate against Muslims, even though this particular executive order only applies to people from 6 of the most terror-rich countries on earth, originally named by Barack Obama, we're still going to impute to Donald Trump some sort of nefarious motive to ban Muslims because he doesn't like Muslims. So, in other words, we're not going to look at the law. We're going to look at what they said about the law. And not even what they said about this law. We're going to look at what he said a year ago about different stuff. And now, if the courts had held this about Obamacare, Obamacare would have been struck down, obviously. Obamacare should have been struck down anyway because Obama was telling the truth when he said Obamacare was not a tax, it was a fee. But the courts specifically ignored Obamacare being a fee and not a tax in order to rewrite the statute and protect Obamacare. So they ignored everything Obama said in order to ensure that Barack Obama's signature law remained law. In this case, they're taking something that is obviously and perfectly legal, and they are saying that it is now illegal because they don't like what Donald Trump said. So let's go through some of the dumber things about this decision, and it is demonstrative of the fact that Congress needs to crack down on the jurisdiction of federal courts. Federal courts should not have this type of jurisdiction. The Ninth Circuit should be broken up as a circuit court of appeals. This is a long-standing opinion of mine. This is not something that is brought about by this particular decision. I wrote my entire third-year law paper at Harvard Law, which I've been attempting to dig up for a while now. I wrote the entire thing on why judicial review is a constitutional error and why it actually has nothing to do with the Constitution of the United States. That said, this decision is perfect evidence of why you cannot have a group of judges who think they are an oligarchic super legislature. They think they're lawmakers. They're not lawmakers. So what does this actual decision say? Well, first, it says that the Constitution bars religious discrimination against foreigners. It says the Establishment Clause applies to people who don't even live in the country. It doesn't apply to American citizens alone. It applies to some random dude on a hilltop in Yemen. So, in other words, if you have a policy that says random dude on a hilltop in Yemen, we're not letting you in because you are a radical Muslim, they say, well, this would violate the Establishment Clause because you obviously prefer Christians to Muslims. This is asinine. First of all, the provisions of the Constitution do not apply to foreigners. The Constitution only applies to people who are citizens of the United States. It does not apply to people who are living any random place in the world. If the Constitution has to grant rights to people to immigrate, regardless of religion, regardless of viewpoint, imagine this, okay? The First Amendment of the Constitution also says you have freedom of speech, it says you have freedom of religion, and it has the Establishment Clause that government cannot establish religion. So, let's say the Constitution were to apply to people all over the world, and now it applies to everyone. Well, the First Amendment also says you have freedom of speech. So, that means that, presumably, that applies to anybody abroad. And those people, we can't discriminate against them based on viewpoint, right? The government is not allowed viewpoint discrimination against you or me. It can't shut me down because of what I'm saying. If we took the same logic that this court is applying to the Establishment Clause and applied it to the Free Speech Clause, what you'd end up with is anyone, anywhere on earth has a right to enter the United States no matter what they think about things. Okay, that's how crazy this court decision is. Other things that this decision says. As I say, the court actually says that motivation matters, not text. They explicitly acknowledge that there is nothing in this executive order that discriminates against Muslims. They then try to make the claim that it discriminates against Muslims, even though it clearly does not discriminate against all Muslims. So the court says the illogic of the government's contentions is palpable. The notion that one can demonstrate animus toward any group of people only by targeting all of them at once is fundamentally flawed. Okay, that doesn't make any sense at all. If you're demonstrating animus for a group of people, obviously you have to demonstrate animus for the entire group of people. If I have a law and it only affects a certain percentage of black people, but it doesn't affect 99% of black people, it's very difficult to say that the law is actually motivated by animus against black people. That seems relatively logical to me. And in fact, the court then goes on to make exactly the same case that they're saying is illogical. Right? They then say this is obviously a Muslim ban because it applies to countries that are largely Muslim. Okay, you can't make a statistical argument like that if you're just claiming that statistical arguments are irrelevant to the question of animus. They quote Donald Trump from March 2016 saying, I think Islam hates us. Okay, March 2016, he was still a candidate. He wasn't even president then. They quote Trump's infamous Muslim ban press release from late 2015, and they say all of this is the backdrop to this executive order, and then they say that because Donald Trump says mean things about the Muslims, that means that the executive order is illegal. And then they quote the 10th Circuit on this issue. And here's what they say. They basically say that maybe at some future point he could pass the exact same executive order and we wouldn't strike it down. We wouldn't put a temporary restraining order on it because we would know that he actually is not a mean guy. So now they're judging Trump as a person. He's a mean guy, right? This is what they say. From the above principles, we conclude that a government cure should be 1, purposeful, 2, public, and 3, at least as persuasive as the initial endorsement of religion. It should be purposeful enough for an objective observer to know unequivocally that the government does not endorse religion. So, in other words, if Donald Trump spends the next 2 years talking about how Islam is just awesome, then they might allow him to pursue this executive order. But until then, until he goes out and says publicly that Islam is the best religion that ever was, and he loves Islam like no other, that it is big league in his own words, until he actually does that, they are going to ban this executive order. So they're going to mind read Donald Trump, which is a challenging thing under any circumstances. It's particularly stupid when the people attempting to mind read Trump are obviously not mind reading Trump. They are mind reading themselves in their perceptions about Trump. Okay, other things that are idiotic about this decision. So they reinforce in this decision this notion pushed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and that federal district judge in Washington that a state is able to sue and get immigration policy held up if it doesn't benefit the state to have more immigration. So the state said one of the big issues in lawyering is something called standing. I can't sue the government based on some random law that doesn't affect me. I can't sue Mathis today based on the fact that I get food poisoning from a separate restaurant. I don't have standing because Mathis hasn't done me any harm, right? You have to standing means that the person you're suing has some connection with the harm that is being inflicted upon you. So what the court does here is they broaden the issue of standing because really the state doesn't have any standing to sue the federal government based on immigration policy. They don't. If they could, then presumably the state of Arizona could have sued the federal government long ago for not enforcing its immigration laws affecting the state of Arizona in negative ways. They weren't able to. But now the court finds standing to open the borders. Why? Because universities in states like Hawaii won't be able to recruit that dude on the hilltop in Yemen. Seriously, this is what it says. It says the state has preliminarily demonstrated that its universities will suffer monetary damages and intangible harms. So now we are now measuring the state standing based on intangible harms, things that can't be measured or felt. Okay, that's totally insane as well. And then finally, I think that the most insane thing here of all, I'll tell you in 1 second. But first, I have to say thank you to our advertisers over at CISO. So they have a new series out that's actually really, really funny. It's called Shrink, and it's about a guy who's $500,000 in debt after going to med school. And instead of actually starting a real practice, he starts conducting free therapy sessions for patients that he finds on Craigslist. And the series is really, really funny. You should go check it out right now. It's critically acclaimed. You can watch the trailer over at YouTube. The series is called Shrink, but you can only do that. You can only actually watch the series if you subscribe to CISO. So CISO is your one-stop shop for all comedies. CISO has backlogs of The Office. It has backlogs of Parks and Rec. It has backlogs of all the British comedies like The Office and all of Monty Python. It has all the late night shows. We're going to play some late night later. Some of the late night is getting really good now, actually. So go to CISO.com and subscribe. It's just $3.99 per month. No joke. And it has all the comedy that you would ever want. CISO.com, SEESO.com. And you get 1 month free if you use promo code Ben. So you can try it out. Risk-free. See if you like it. CISO.com, promo code Ben. My wife and I really, really do enjoy CISO. We watch it almost every night because it is hilarious. And the amount of comedy content is astounding. They have the entire backlog of Saturday Night Live going back to the days when it didn't suck. So go and check it out right now. CISO.com and become a subscriber for $3.99 per month, and you can access their content from everything, including Amazon Fire and Apple TV or Android or iOS. You can get it anywhere. So check it out, CISO.com, and remember, use that promo code Ben at checkout so that you can, number one, signal that you listen to the show, and number two, so that you can actually get that 1 month for free and see if you like it. Okay, so the stupidest thing of all about this ruling, well, I should say the second stupidest thing. The stupidest thing is this whole feelings routine, this routine that Donald Trump's feelings about Islam shape how the court rules on an executive order. I'll tell you the reason that that's the stupidest thing. The reason that's the stupidest thing is if people can now sue the President of the United States and say that he is violating the Establishment Clause simply because he has quote-unquote animus for some group outside the United States, that violates the Establishment Clause, then you could theoretically have somebody sue Trump to stop him from pursuing military action against like Al-Qaeda and ISIS because he doesn't really hate Al-Qaeda and ISIS, he hates all of Islam, right? They could use exactly the same logic that they're using right now on immigration. The logic they're using on immigration, Trump says, I want to stop Al-Qaeda, I want to stop ISIS, I want to stop terrorists from coming into the country. And they say, no, what you really mean is you hate Muslims. Why couldn't you use that exact same logic with regard to what he's doing in war? Why couldn't you say, well, what he really means is he doesn't hate Al-Qaeda or ISIS, he hates all Muslims. He wants a war with Islam. And that means I'm going to sue him because the Establishment Clause doesn't allow him to make policy that discriminates based on religion. Okay, this is crazy talk. The stupidest thing, however, is this is the second stupidest thing in this ruling, however, is the granting of standing to the plaintiff, a guy named Dr. Ismail El-Sheikh. Okay, Dr. El-Sheikh is an American citizen of Egyptian descent. There are two issues that make him not ripe for standing here, that don't grant him standing in this case. One, he's an American citizen. The executive order does not apply to American citizens. Two, he's from Egypt. It doesn't apply to Egyptians. Egypt is not one of the countries on the list. So there are two separate reasons why. So number one, he's an American citizen. It doesn't apply to him. Two, even if it didn't apply to American citizens, it still wouldn't apply to him because he's from Egypt. So who does it apply to? He's suing because his mother-in-law is from Syria, and she wants to come visit. Seriously. His mother. First of all, this alone should mean that he never gets standing because no one wants their mother-in-law to visit. But second of all, the idea that he's getting standing based on his mother-in-law living in Syria is insane. How does the court come up with the idea of standing? They say he has standing because there's a direct quote. He thinks that the executive order is devastating to me, my wife, and children since it saddened him. I am not making that up. That is in the court decision. The court decision says that this guy has standing to sue the federal government because the policy of the federal government made him sad. Okay, I am now going to sue the federal government for every law and regulation it has passed in the last 20 years because they all make me sad, because they all suck. It doesn't work that way. This is not how law works. This is a usurpacious court. This is a court that is usurping, obviously, the power of the presidency, and it's about time for Congress to step in and do something about it because this is fully crazy. This is fully crazy. We'll talk more about that. We'll also do the mailbag, but in order for you to do that and see that, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com and become a subscriber. If you go over to dailywire.com, $8 a month allows you access to watch the rest of the podcast live and in living color. You can become part of the mailbag, too. You don't get your questions answered unless you are one of the members of our special coterie of geniuses. And you only become part of that coterie. You only get your special decoder badge when you go to Decoder Ring, when you go to dailywire.com and you become a subscriber for $8 a month. You can become an annual subscriber as well. Right now, we are giving out copies of the runaway bestseller, Reasons to Vote Democrat by Michael Knowles. This is the book that is soaring. It's still number one on Amazon. It's been number one on Amazon for a week and a half, and it is literally a blank book of pages. But you get a free copy of it because it is hilarious. I will take partial credit because I put my quote on the front that says thorough. In any case, you can get a free copy of that when you become an annual subscriber, and Michael will sign it for you. He'll be happy to sign it for you since he obviously has nothing better to do like write actual books. So go over to dailywire.com right now and become an annual subscriber. You get that for free. Plus, I promise, I keep saying this, the Shapiro store is coming. There will be discounts for subscribers, and you can go and check that out over at dailywire.com, or later listen to the rest of the show at iTunes and SoundCloud, and leave a rating over at iTunes. We are the top conservative podcast in the nation.